What's up, plant people? How do you feel about another bonus episode? Well, too bad you're getting one. Hey, this is the Planthropology Podcast, and I am Vikram Baliga, your humble host and guide. And normally on this show, we talk about the lives, careers, and general awesomeness of some very cool plant people. And today, we're still talking about cool people, or a very cool person at least. And this person's name is Dr. David Mendes. And man, David's such a good guy. Just such a good guy. And he's the host of the Papa PhD podcast. And we're in this little podcasting group together. We've been, friends, especially on Twitter, but just friends in general for a while now through this whole weird, wild world of podcasting. And it turns out we both hit 50,000 downloads for our shows like a couple of weeks ago, and actually maybe last week. And it happened to work out that this milestone came up at the same time for both of us, which was super cool. So we decided to do a live stream, and if you're following either of us on Twitter, you may have already seen this or heard about this or whatever, but we got together and we just talked about how our shows started and what a wild trip it's been, and like what our shows are about and where we're going and everything else. And so it was just like a fun, casual conversation. It was, I've said this before, but this podcast and everything I do with podcasting, I feel like is just a maybe a thinly veiled excuse to make new friends or to get to talk to old friends. And I'm not sorry. I'm not. So David and I have known each other for a while, but we have never actually gotten to just like hang out and talk. So we spent an hour and change hanging out and talking, and it was really, really wonderful. So this episode is just the recording of that live stream, and you'll get to know a little bit more about planthropology. You'll get to know a lot more about the Papa PhD podcast, which you should absolutely be listening to if you're not already. But the usual plugs, look us up or look me up on all the social media places: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Search for Planthropology. I'll probably be there. Look for the bristlecone pine, designed by Dr. Beth Nichols, who was on the show and is a wonderful human. I'm over on TikTok at the Plant Prof. You'll be able to find Papa PhD podcast pretty much everywhere. Just search for Papa PhD podcast. So without any more ado, let's get into it. Let's do it. Time for the show in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, we're live for this cumulative 100,000 download celebration between Papa PhD and the Planthropology podcast. Vikram, I was just mentioning before we came live that we've known each other for a while in this group of like science-y podcasts, but it's the first time we're actually interacting one-on-one on camera. And I think this milestone of 50,000 downloads, it's just funny that it falls like almost the same week. Yours was a few days ago.
Yeah.
I just hit 50,000. I was showing you at the beginning, I just hit 50,000 today. So yeah, I'm super happy to have you here today and to celebrate this. We need to celebrate some of these milestones amongst ourselves, but also with our viewers, with our listeners who maybe don't suspect all the work that's behind putting an episode a week or more, depending. But so you actually hit 50,000 first. So I don't know if you have a little word of celebration of thankfulness to share now.
Yeah. Oh man, 100%. Like I, when I started this a couple of years ago, I didn't really know. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going for it. Like, I'm just going to try it. And the fact that, I have this super niche little nerdy science podcast about plants, the thought that there have been 50,000, I mean, maybe not 50,000 individual people, but that it has entered someone's headphones or like car speakers or something 50,000 times. That's crazy to think about. And no, so I appreciate for sure, everyone that tunes in, week after week to hear me stumble through an introduction and then talk to some really cool people. Because honestly, like my show ultimately, and I think yours too, is that like I don't matter for it. I'm not important. It's the cool people I get to talk to and tell their stories and what they research and the science they do. Like that means a lot to me as someone that does this. Yeah, maybe a little bit for work, but mostly because it's fun. It means a lot that people care about the stories that we're trying to tell.
It does. It's super. It's funny because you said something when you posted that it was almost unbelievable to reach that number, considering we started in 2019, both of us.
Mhm.
Me in the summer and you in the fall, I think, or almost winter.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's amazing to me is to imagine not only that, which is already like mind-boggling in a certain way, because I'm here in my basement with my computer, my mic, and then people listen week after week, or people share with friends, and then but when you imagine that they're doing this around the world, there's like people, let's say, in Japan, or it is humbling. And I am also really, really grateful for everyone who one day decides to click and to listen through, and to even sometimes give some feedback. For us, especially because there's a lot of podcasts out there. Things have changed, even from in 2 years. There's a lot of like big podcasts. There's like, let's say, there's a podcast industry. There's like there's big conglomerate, like groups of podcasts, but also agencies that produce a certain amount of podcasts, put money into it. There's teams doing research and doing production, and for us indie podcasters, it's kind of yay, we're here, and people do listen, and you don't have to be a big budget show to reach people and to have a message that's interesting, or that people find interesting or fun, entertaining, or touching, depending. But in my case, I'm very much like you. I stay very much in the behind the scenes, not although I'm on the mic, but I always, especially because mostly up until now the podcast has been interviews, I give the stage to the person who's presenting their story. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about this outlet, right? Is that throughout time, it's like we figure out how to tell good stories, and whether it's through plays or through writing or through television or movies or whatever. I, I think part of the human condition is telling stories, right? Like we're like whether it's biological or social or whatever, like we tell stories, and that's what we do, and it's how we contextualize the world around us. So I think the fact that we can sit here in our offices or whatever, or basements or wherever we are, and like you said, reach people around the world and help other people tell a little bit of the story of their life and how they got to where they are and what makes the thing that they do interesting and important, like that for me is really meaningful. I think that that's very fulfilling, and it's fun. I enjoy doing this most of the time, like 90% of the time. So I'll tell you my least favorite thing, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is about it. I hate writing show notes. I hate it. It's like 4 sentences. It takes me literally 10 minutes when I actually sit down to do it. I hate doing it. And so like everything up in the process until I'm like about to hit like write all my show notes and post, I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, I got to do this. And then I don't know. That's just my weird brain, but.
Oh, but I'm pretty much like you. It's the fun part. The most fun part is the conversation with the person if it's an interview. But it's true that if you want to have a website with a page that when people get there, there's content, there's something to read, there's some presentation of what's in the episode. It is work. It's work, and then it takes, for me at least, I what I do is when I am editing, because sometimes there's something I want to adjust, or I take too long to get to a question, and then I kind of shorten it, things like that, mostly on my side. I don't want listeners to be like, okay, when is the question coming? But when I'm doing that exercise, I have my WordPress page open for that week's episode, and I try to take bullets. Okay, we talked about this, we talked about that, but it's work. It's work, and I agree that whenever I set up to do it, it's like, okay, the not so much fun part is starting now. But
And
I think it's important.
yeah, oh, I totally agree. And whether I read the show notes on every podcast episode I listen to or not, I like knowing they're there, right? So like if I go to like listen to an episode of whatever and I'm like, oh, that was really interesting. I'd like to find out more about it. It is nice having a link to either the guest or some tidbits of information or whatever else. It is useful and it is important. And I have to tell myself that over and over again because it's one of those things that for whatever reason I just have to make myself do. But it is important.
Yeah, and same thing. It's also, again, and I think it's the same with you, because we bring on people onto the show and we want to share their story. We also want to give them a service in a way of sharing their latest I don't know, content that they produced or their book. This week, it's funny. This week, I just published the episode today, and it's an author who's a neighbor of yours. She's in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Amy Gentry. She published in February this book called Bad Habits, and it's about the bad habits within academia. It's interesting, and it fits within the show because it's a thriller set within academia, and you follow a protagonist in her way through becoming a tenured professor, etc. It was really a cool conversation. She's a neighbor of yours. I don't know how close it is to Lubbock.
So Texas is pretty big.
Yeah, right. But well, she's closer than me. Let's say here in Montreal.
Well, that's true. That's very true. No, so for context, like I'm kind of up in the Panhandle area, like Southern Panhandle, and Austin's kind of right in the middle of the state, and it would take me on the highway about 5.5 hours to get there.
Okay. Well, she's in your state then. That's
yeah.
I have to brush up my geography.
Oh no, well, there's no reason to know that. Like that's such a random thing. Like and of course I'm a Texan. I'm have lived in Texas pretty much my whole life, and we like to brag about how big Texas is. I don't know why. It's one of our weird psychological quirks, I guess. But if you ask a Texan, is the best. Texas is the best at everything. So we can't help it.
So yeah, but the thing that I was saying, the show notes also to me are a service to the person who gave their time to be on the show. They have a book they published, or they have a blog that they're doing. Well, it's only fair that it's that a link to those things is offered to the listeners who, like you mentioned, want to explore a little more. I even have direct links to the person's Twitter if they have one, etc. Because the cool thing about podcasting, it's in people's ears, gets people thinking, and it's a way to I think it's a way to interconnect people, if not directly with people's stories. So yeah, offering that platform of letting the person interact a little bit more or dig a little deeper, I think it's a key. Although it's not essential to the podcast production adventure. I think there's much simpler ways to start and to run a podcast today. But I'm like you. I like having some things that are like solid and constant, and that I feel offer some value to the listeners.
So I think it'd be interesting to talk about. I was kind of, before we got on here, I had a couple other recordings this morning, and I kept thinking, like, okay, I need to think through this a little bit more. I was thinking it'd be interesting maybe to tell the story of kind of how we got into this and what started the ideas for the podcast, and maybe just a little bit more about us. Because I think a lot of the people listening probably know some of that and have maybe been around. But, since this is going out to Twitter and different places, maybe there's some folks that this is the first time that have, encountered our two shows. So do you want to go first?
I can go first. And it's fun. We're gonna have a back and forth between interviewers. It's cool.
Yeah.
So my story with Papa PhD started when I finished my PhD. There was, there were difficulties. I had gone into the PhD without knowing too much about academia, about even the PhD itself. I got into a PhD program in Portugal, and eventually I came here to Montreal as a visiting research student to do the research. But I soon understood that people here took much longer to do a PhD than the 3 years of financing that I had. So this meant that at the end of the PhD, there was a lot of stress. It was difficult, and when I finished, and then I ended up not keeping on the track of research. I became first a long distance tutor, then medical writer, and now mostly what I do is translation in the biomedical domain. But in the years after the PhD, whenever I was approached to participate in a career panel, I really first wanted to go, and I did accept, because I wanted to be able to share with people, with the grad students who were now going through it, the errors that I made, and make them think of some blind spots that they might have, which I know I had while going through the PhD. And year after year, I kept seeing that there was a lot of anxiety in graduate students, and it wasn't really changing year after year, and because I defended in 2010, and whenever I was invited, the questions, the doubt about what happens professionally after the PhD, they were still there each time, year after year that I was taking part in these things. And it just so happened that in 2019, I was already, working as a translator, but I had a project with my dad in Portugal. He wanted me to help with something for 6 months, so I kind of cut the cord a little bit with translation and focused on that. And when I came back from that, there was kind of a lull, and it was a kind of a coincidence. At the time that I was, waiting for new contracts to come, there was a lot of messaging around why you should start your podcast today. I don't know if you noticed this a couple of years ago in 2019 when you started. And still today, the style has changed, because now there's a lot of services being sold around that. But at that time, it was less of that, and it was more of why you should start your podcast today. And I had a mic because I kind of tried to start playing an instrument as an adult, but I had it's funny, I had recorded this song for I don't know if you know the Twist podcast, This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Okay, in 2010, 2009, each year, I don't know if it was each year, but they had a call for music for sciencey songs. And in 2010, I created one called Molecular Motor, with GarageBand, and I had a mic and I had all the gear, and it actually got on the Twist science music CD of that year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. One day I need to find someone to create a video clip, of dyneins or whatever molecular motors. Now there's really cool animation around that. Anyway, I had the gear, I had this will to help, this desire to help the community, to help the young researchers, and it was kind of an alignment of stars. Why you should start a podcast today? Of course I do, and I started working on thinking about the concept, looking at how it could, what it could be. And I knew a bunch of people, and all of us I imagine who've gone through PhDs know a bunch of people who have done different things after their PhD, and probably don't know so many people who have been able to follow the tenure track, because we know the statistics around that today. But I thought, I'm in Montreal, I'm bilingual, I'm going to create a podcast which will have French-speaking and English-speaking guests. The first ones I knew, they were part of my network, but then eventually people started to either reach out or to recommend guests. But this was the genesis of it. Then the name, people ask about the name. Some people thought it was about parenthood during the PhD, but it had to be a name that worked in French and English. And Papa and Papa, it's the same.
Yeah.
And I was a dad, and there was this thing of when I defended, we had our first child already. So for me, this thing of the post PhD, one of the big components was being a father, which I wasn't before, and this is how kind of Papa PhD. And then I don't know, I imagine in my I imagine that a dad is kind of a paternal. There's this kind of paternality thing of helping people that I thought fit together. So that's why it's Papa PhD. I don't know if I was too jumbled, but this is kind of in a nutshell, the story behind why I started the podcast and why we're here today.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it's a good mission, right? Because this whole, academia is a whole thing.
Yes.
And we're both, maybe we've both gone through it, and now maybe we're in different places in relation to it, right? Like I'm not tenure track. I still kind of live in academia world, sitting in this office on campus, and hiding out here at the greenhouse. And it's funny because I think we get told that, like, hang on a sec, grab something else. So, like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be an adult, but this is the kind of thing I have on my shelf behind me, like coconuts with googly eyes, and like there's actually like here's a planter that has a face on it, and
That's so funny.
I have found this weird little niche where I get to play plant guy, and run a greenhouse and play with plants and do some landscaping stuff. And I get to teach. And like, there are days that I feel like I have won, like I won, right? Like I found like the job in academia that lets me be weird and have a coconut on my shelf. But yeah, but I think we've both been through it, and there is a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and just a lot of uncertainty surrounding the whole thing, during, after, before, whatever. And I think that is a good service you provide, that it gives good context for people. And I think, sometimes as academics, as students, as whatever, our support systems within the group or within the institution are maybe not as good as they should be. And I think that we have to find support and find common ground and find people who understand where we can. And I think you do a great job of telling those stories.
Well, I try to, definitely. And things are changing. I see this around me in universities here in Montreal, but not only. I'm in contact with people a lot because of the podcast, in contact with people at Johns Hopkins, at UC Irvine, and programs are being created. People are thinking about the graduate students in a different way. But like you were saying, academia is a big thing, is a big old thing. And big old things have this way of being hard to change, and it takes time. And it takes people that really want to change things. But yeah, it's the cool thing about the podcast. And I I don't know what's your experience, but you must have been. I was a podcast listener before I was a podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
And podcasts have this way of because you have them in your ears. You're maybe doing something. You may be running. You may be doing your chores or whatever. But there's this intimacy with the story that's being told that for me, sharing the stories of people who have followed different paths, I feel that versus a video, which would have been very edited and very everything has to be very strong visually, etc. The podcast has, for me, is this perfect medium of storytelling. You were talking about storytelling, and I think because the PhD, we're talking about the PhD as it's this one thing, but it's different in humanities. It's different in the social sciences, in I don't know, economics, etc., or in engineering. It's very different, and we do try to talk about it as one thing. But the only way to really start getting a feeling of what it can be is through stories of people who came from these different domains and who tell their difficulties, their wins, their fails, and for me at least, I think the podcast is really the best medium for that. Now, the one thing I wish is that, like, let's say, transcription services would be much cheaper and much better than they are, because then I would feel that I'm really serving everyone, even people who cannot hear, and also people who don't really like the technology, prefer to read. It would be great to have all these conversations in text, but it's still so expensive.
It is, and a lot of the automated services leave a lot to be desired. And so
you need to put
you
a lot
pretty,
of hours after.
oh gosh. And so like, yeah, if you want to do it, you almost have to pay a transcriptionist to listen and do it. And that's, sorry, my computer's making noises at me. Yeah, no, that it can be very expensive and it can be quite the undertaking. That's something that I'm working on too, is trying to get transcripts done for my episodes. And I've got, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm well into the show. And so like, if I do it, I want to go back and do the back catalog too. But it's like 75 episodes or something now. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But I will eventually.
I tell myself the same. I'm thinking of how to improve the show, and I'm sure it's the same thing on your side, to try to bring something better and better, and and hope that eventually we're able as indie podcasters to get a sponsor, or to because again, if you compare with some of the podcasts I listen to, I'm thinking of a Hidden Brain, or there's a lot of podcasts that are very well produced, but they have a high production value, and there's a lot of investment. It's teams of people working in there. There's a transcriptionist, there's a fact checker, there's the person who takes care of the sound effects, etc., etc., etc. There's the person who takes care of the social media, and here we're like a 7-instrument man. I don't know if you have those, the guys who have,
yeah,
they have the drum and the this and that, and well, we try to do our best, but the thing is, time is limited, and then money is limited too. But maybe with AI, things are gonna somehow become easier, or we're gonna be able to do something automated that is closer to a good product. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. It's certainly a challenge, but I think we'll get there. I think it's one of those things that's you're right. That's where we should be. It's just trying to figure out how to get there. How to get there.
Exactly.
You and I both have other jobs. Like we don't. We're not we're not full-time podcasters. So there's always a trade-off, right?
Exactly. And now I'm gonna ask you about your story, because I don't know how the genesis. I don't know what the genesis. The what's the origin story of Planthropology is. I've seen it evolve. I've seen the logo evolve, but I think people that are watching or listening would be interested to know who was Vikram before Planthropology, and what was the moment where the project was born.
So I was in the middle of writing a dissertation, and I didn't want to do it.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay. No, I mean that there is some truth to that. Honestly, so I had a conversation one day with a friend of mine, actually, who's been on a couple times, Kyle Tengler. He was my first guest, and then he came back a little bit later on. And we've been friends for 10 years. I don't know, a long time, since I started my master's. So yeah, 10 or 11 years. And we were just up here is actually pretty shortly. I'd been working at the greenhouse where I work for about a year. And we were up here talking about nerdy plant stuff. We were talking about mesquite trees and land management. That's what we do when we get together. We talk about science, and we're nerds, whatever. And I kind of half jokingly said, this was in, say, maybe February or March of 2019. Hey, this would make a good podcast. And we both kind of laughed about it, like, okay. So that September, our department was working to hire and appoint a new department chair. The last guy was rolling off. We were trying to find someone else to do it. And as our current department chair was going through his interviews and all that, he said several times, we need to be working as a department. And he made some bigger claims about the college and the university and everything else, but as a department about doing good outreach, like taking our science and not sitting on it as much and putting it out there and telling a story better. And he was talking about different outlets to do that. And, whether it's podcasts or YouTube or, more extension style kind of public publications and things like, went through a whole list. Well, I had already kind of been thinking about this podcast, and he said that, and it stuck in my brain. And I was like, okay. So a couple months later, in October, November, I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So I ordered some stuff. I didn't tell anybody. They didn't fire me. It was good. Uh, and so then, yeah, it started just as a way to tell the story of the science that we do a little bit better. So, most of my guests are plant scientists or like work in the natural sciences in some way, whether they're water people or soil scientists or food producers. And they're not all scientists, right? I talk to industry folks, I talk to students, I talk to people who volunteer, anything and everything that's sort of related. I want someone to come on and talk to me. And so for me, there's two parts. I want to investigate like our human connection to the environment, which is kind of where the name comes from, like the anthropology of plants, like planthropology, right? But I also I think sometimes, and you kind of hinted at this some, or maybe more than hinted at it. As an educator, as a college educator, I feel like the part of the story we don't tell well, right? We get our undergrads in, we get our grad students in. It's like, okay, you're going to spend the next 4 years and $80,000 learning about soil. Hooray, right? But the question we don't answer all the time is now what? Then what? Right? Where do you go? What do you do? How do you turn my 4 year education, or in my case, in your case, maybe our 10, 12, whatever year education into something? Like what does that mean? And so I'm trying to interview people who are both in the industry, on industry side, academic side, about what keeps them getting up and going to work. Why do they care about what they do? Why do they love their jobs? Why are they still interested? So that any student that's listening could maybe think, or potential student could think, oh, this plant science or environmental science or whatever it is could be something I could see myself doing at this person's age or at this point in my career, because that's a gap that I have always felt like we needed to fill. Is I don't think in education sometimes we're telling the practical side of the story. Sometimes, like, the education's great, the knowledge is great, so what? You know, like what do you do with it? What do you practically do with it? And I'm very much an applied scientist, so that kind of fits into my overall like ethos too. I would rather research, how do you save water in your landscape? How do you produce more out of whatever you're growing? The basic science is great, and I'm glad there are people that are really good at doing that. That's not my forte. I would rather study and research and communicate about things that actually, in a direct sense, can impact a grower's life or a homeowner's life or a student's life or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I have to say that anyway, I don't know how to say this in a way that's how can I say well, it's not a question of awkwardness, but I really admire your humor, your voice, your mic technique, or your just your I don't know if your voice projects on on its own.
I'm loud. I'm real loud.
But you're not. It's not aggressive loud. You have volume, but anyway, there's something also about the fact that I'm not speaking my first language. You are, and I'm always kind of self-conscious about that. But I have talked about this with other people before. We always remember, at least I've always remembered, the teachers who had this passion, but also this knack for teaching. And I think you're one of the. I would have loved to be in one of your classes. Sometimes you share some things on Twitter, some feedback from your students, and it's often funny and and you have this also kind of this almost self-deprecating but funny humor about yourself that I appreciate a lot. But I wonder, given that I have you here, that you are in touch with students. I don't know, are you in touch with students in person these days? Has it resumed?
Yep. Yeah. Well, class starts Monday. So today's
okay, so
Thursday. We start up Monday.
Okay. So yeah, one thing that I don't have my hand on the pulse of is undergrads. How are they envisioning their futures? Because where I'm usually focused on like 6 years later,
Hmm.
on the master's, PhD, etc. But one thing that you were talking about them, and it's true to me that it can start earlier. This thing of thinking about the future, and I'm pretty sure because of the generational gap between when I went through undergrad and the people who are going through undergrad now, you must have a very current idea of how these people who are now going into university and deciding to study a little bit longer, what their outlook is on life. I don't know. This is not something we discussed about before, but you just got me curious about it.
That's a really interesting question. So I kind of see it on two sides, right? Like I teach students. I teach introductory horticulture here at Texas Tech, and this semester I have 153 students in my lecture. It's a big class, like lots of students. And so my one-on-one time with them, and I'm not teaching any. I haven't taught any labs in a little while. So like our lab TAs have a lot of like face-to-face, very direct contact with students on an individual basis because they're smaller groups. For me, I get limited from the instruction side, direct one-on-one contact with each of my students, except for the ones that make a point to come talk to me and that come make a point to actually, be involved in all that. And I try my best to learn names and all that, but that's a lot of students. My brain, I'm not that smart. It's a challenge. But so, and on the other side, I employ, as the greenhouse manager here, I employ undergraduate workers. So I usually have
Okay.
4 to 6 undergrads that work for me. And it's really interesting. That's really an interesting question because it varies a little bit. These, I'm going to say kids, and I don't mean that to sound condescending. And when I say that, I really don't mean it that way, right? I think sometimes in academia, which is the weirdest thing to me, kind of down on students, and it doesn't make any sense to me because they're the whole reason we're here. They should be the entire reason we're here. But they're young, right? It strikes me that an 18-year-old, they're kids. They're kids. They're called to be adults. They're having to make adult decisions and all that, and about the rest of their lives. But they're kids, and I think it's important. So let me answer your question. Then I have another thought. So I think that most of them have somehow, and it boggles my mind sometimes to think that they do. They have a lot of optimism. As much as we like to joke about Gen Z, and I do it. I'm a millennial. I like to joke about Gen Z as much as the next 30-something-year-old. But they, I think, have a clear. How do I say it? A lot of them have a very clear picture of not just what they want their lives to look like, their own lives, but kind of what they want the world to look like in the future. And I think that they maybe have new and interesting ways of getting at that, like maybe a world that's more equitable for anyone and everyone, and a world that is a little bit kinder to folks with differences and things like that. I see a lot of that, and I try to encourage that as an instructor as much as I can, and try to maybe structure my class to be as accessible to folks as possible, and try to whether I say it or not directly, to support that ethos that they kind of bring towards life, right? Obviously things are chaotic. maybe that's a mild term in the world right now, but I see a lot more optimism than one might think. And so that's, from the student side, just hearing their comments and stuff. But I work very closely with these 4-6 students that I employ here, and they're so awesome. They're awesome. I have, it may be unpopular with some groups, but I have a lot of hope for our future because of these students that, they're passionate, they're smart, they work harder than anyone's willing to give them credit for. And they, I think, they want a lot for their lives, and they maybe are just finding new ways to get what they want for their lives than maybe what you and I were taught growing up. Because I think, as in our generation, it was, oh, you do this, you go to college, you get a job, you work 40 hours and X, Y, and Z. And yeah, I think we're maybe finding that that's not the most sustainable way to live a life. And I think some of these younger folks in my students' generation and probably our kids' generation are going to have a very different way of approaching life, and that's kind of exciting for me. I think that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And the thing that I've heard is that some of them have this anxiety related to the climate change, etc., which
Sure.
I think is they're justified to have it.
That's reasonable. Yeah.
But they do have to kind of find new paths to follow towards their happiness and their contribution to society, and I think they're choosing moving away from certain of those things that you said. Some of them are now trying to have tiny houses and and be zero how do you say it in English?
Like zero waste or
zero waste, and they're acting upon these things that when I had their age, I didn't think about them really. I was taught not to throw something on the floor, but I wasn't taught that having a lot of garbage was actually a problem, and we should reduce it, and we should refuse stuff that's overpackaged, etc., etc., which are things that now I'm awake to. But at their age, I was not. So it must be interesting, and it must be inspiring to see people of that age bring up these issues and actually do things about it.
It is for sure, and I feel like it's my job to try my best as someone who, for better or worse, has some kind of influence over their life, right? Mm-hmm. Like to not let myself turn into the stodgy old guy that's like, these kids don't know anything. Yeah. I think they bring a lot to it, and I try to, again, like I said, and probably with mixed results, try to encourage it as best I can, and whatever that means, however I can, and I think pretty much what you see is what you get, and my stupid sense of humor is what ends up in the classroom. And I tell these same like lame jokes that end up on the podcast, like, and on Twitter. I tell that to my students because so I think as educators, maybe just as people, we don't really owe each other a whole lot except authenticity. I think that, like, everyone's just trying to survive. Like, we're all just trying to make it and be happy and live better lives and take care of our families and the planet and all that in whichever way we can. And so I try to be as open with them about my struggles as I am about anything else. So, like, if there's a day that I'm behind, on grading or whatever, I try not to make excuses for it. I'm like, look, I had a crappy week, stuff happened. Life's hard. And I try to be maybe more than I should be. I don't know. I don't know how else to be, except just trying to be honest with them about my experience, not just as a horticulture plant guy, but as a human. Like, how did I make it to where I am as a human? And I think, again, those are the kinds of stories we can also tell through this medium of podcasting. We can be honest, we can be kind of real with it.
It's true. And I think you really do a good job at that. And whenever I see one of your videos on Twitter, or whenever I listen to one of your podcasts, I feel like I'm in the room with you. There's something about your authenticity, and I think that's really it. There's no okay, I'm Dr. Baliga, and now here I'm going to talk about I think it's one of the key things that I was, when I was saying that I appreciated it, what you do. Definitely your delivery and how real you are, and I think that's what is touching to people, and that's what makes people engage.
Well, that means a lot. I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, and whenever you have these videos with a plant and you have googly eyes on the plant and you're talking with it, I'm just like, this is awesome. But I know your humor works 100% with me. Sure. But I was gonna rebound on something you said about a community and about the younger generations. I have a feeling, and again, you must have a better finger on the pulse of this, that they have a stronger sense of community than we and generations before us had. I have this feeling that we're transitioning from individualism to community as we go. as we come to these new generations. And I think that I'm going to make a strange parallel here, but I think that as podcasters, as indie podcasters, it would be important to think about this and create communities of podcasters, because we're or it's easy to be or not easy. It's difficult to be found and to be seen as an indie podcaster because there's so much out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people creating podcasts every day, podcasts that maybe don't reach 7 episodes, but they're there. And but it's also important in our communities, when we're doing recycling, when we're doing composting and things like that. And I think all of these tendencies that are coming, and a lot of them related to, dealing with this climate change, etc., and with pollution, I think it's making the community ties stronger again, maybe to a level that they were, I don't know, hundreds of years ago. I don't know what your feeling is about this, but I think community should be a central theme of a lot of our communicating and of our actions in these coming years.
100%. And I think, we've found a cool little group of podcasters that we kind of like, message back and forth, share each other's stuff, just kind of, bounce ideas off of each other. And it's really fun. Like, I think we've got a great little group of people. And it's interesting because I feel like coming from a world that is incredibly competitive in academia and business and whatever, like there's no reason we can't all succeed at what we're doing here, right? The fact that we're like collaborating on a video to celebrate that we both hit 50,000 downloads this week. Like, can you imagine like two tenure track people like talking together at a meeting about, oh, we both hit this many citations? It's super competitive and kind of cutthroat. And I think we've kind of been taught that that's maybe how it's supposed to be, but it doesn't have to be. I think the fact that we can all support each other and that we're all better off by kind of raising the whole industry and supporting not the individualism, but like the independence of every single podcast. That's why I think like indie podcast groups and little networks that support true indie podcasts are awesome. And I have nothing against the big shows. I listen to a lot of big podcasts that are like Science Versus is one of my favorite podcasts, and they have a whole team of researchers. It's a Gimlet show, and they
Gimlet's
like
one of them.
Yeah, but they have all this whole team, and they produce like an incredible product. And I'm grateful for what they do because I get awesome content. But like I think again, we can all as indie podcasters really be supporting each other, because I think when one of us wins, we all win, because it gives more legitimacy to the industry. It shows we're really bad, I think, as humans, and maybe it's just Western society, I don't know, about like turning everything corporate after a while, right? Things that start grassroots and kind of pure turn into this big conglomeration of, 2 or 3 big power players. We tend towards it's interesting because if life tends towards entropy, we kind of go the opposite way with a lot of our endeavors, right? We try to make order out of chaos. And sometimes maybe a little bit of chaos is not a bad thing when we're trying to bring in different views and give more people a mic,
It's true. And I think podcasting, because of the way it was born and because of the RSS feed and how it works, I think some entropy will always stay. Well, that will always remain. But today, this year, we are seeing and last year, big corporate players starting to put their pieces on the board and buying shows. Joe Rogan with Spotify, for example, and then a bunch of other like exclusive deals. And it can be scary for people who want to maybe start a podcast, to say, oh, I can't compete with that. But hey, like Vikram was saying, we listen to this podcast. For me, one that I really, really like is Hidden Brain, with Shankar Vedantam. And actually he's kind of, I think, maybe my interviewing mentor. I don't know. I like his style. He always there was always touching a chord with me. And but now again, they started Hidden Brain Media, and I think it's Hidden Brain Media, and they're going that way of making it a business, because that's the way the corporate world works. And if you want sponsors, and if you want to, etc., etc., you want to make it a system that brings value but also makes money, that's the way you have to go. But my point is, people who have an idea, an audio project that they want to launch it, use your phone. They all have
Mhm.
great microphones. Use your phone if you want, just to start, and get on one of those cheap or almost or free even platforms, the ones that don't take your IP, and start. And like Vikram was saying, he had the idea. This professor spoke. It kind of gelled the idea in his head. Said, "Okay, I'm starting. I'm buying my gear, and I'm starting." And now here we are, 50,000 downloads later, and we enjoy this. And one of the things we enjoy is that people enjoy it. For sure, the fact that you see that people are listening through your what you've worked often for me at least, like late at night on Wednesdays, because the episode is coming out on Thursday. But then when you see the downloads, and you see, I don't know if you get geographical data, but I love to see, okay, someone in Kenya, someone in Japan, someone in Turkey. Like, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'm kind of repeating myself again on that, but it's one of the things that give me a lot of satisfaction, for sure. So yeah, just if you have a podcast project, start, and then it's consistency. If you're consistent, people will start. You get more visibility once the platforms and the algorithms see that Joe publishes every Wednesday at this hour, and then there's show notes. There's all of these other things that can help the Google bots to bring you up in the searches, etc. But it's just a phone and your idea. I don't know if you have comments on this, Vikram, but for me, I think you can start with just that if it's what you want to do right now.
Yeah, just try it. And the nice thing is the entry barriers, like you say, are super low, right? You need a microphone of some kind, mobile, this big ridiculous thing I bought, whatever.
Yeah, some people do it with their Apple headphones with the mic. It's fine,
and it's fine. What I have discovered, I'm kind of a gearhead, unfortunately, and I love, like, I got a new mic, I got a new that for better or worse, I'm a gearhead, right?
Yeah.
But I don't need to be. If all I had was my phone and my headphones, I could make a podcast and it could sound fine. There's plenty of free ways to do it. I think just give it a shot. And I think also, don't fall into like the sunk cost fallacy of it. Like, if you tried it for 7 episodes, 10 episodes, and you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. Okay, you're not committed, right? Do what you want to do. And for me, like, I have managed to get this kind of worked into my job description. So outreach is part of what I do. But for me, like, if it stops being fun, I don't really want to do it anymore. Like, I do this for my listeners, right? I love that people listen, and I want to produce the best product I can for them. And I do it for my guests because I want to give them the best platform I can. So all of the sometimes shameless self-promotion and all of it's for that. It's for a better platform and a better experience for the listener. But ultimately, I enjoy doing it. And like, we're both busy. Everyone's busy. And so if it stops being something that you are excited about doing, maybe reevaluate. And I don't mean just like, I'm going to stop today, but maybe try to figure out why you're not enjoying it anymore. Right. And then work through that. And it may be, okay, this has run its course and I'm done, and that's fine. Or maybe, I just need to change up the format or release episodes less often, or whatever. There's no rules. It's
especially if you're indie, like, could be your rules are the rules.
Yeah, do what you want. It's which I think is kind of freeing, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, one thing that I don't know what was your experience, but the first few episodes, I think if I remember well, I followed someone's instruction, or actually a book that I had read, and I published 3 episodes to begin, because that's what they said. And then it's like that, you wait for the first few downloads. Do you remember that? Do you remember those days? Just for people who might be wanting to start, just to kind of tell them to be patient and to
Mhm.
be, if they have the passion and if it's fun every time, keep doing it. And little by little, people will know you, they'll refer you to someone else, and then it'll grow. But it's a slow, at least in my experience, it's been a slow process.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, it was for me. And I didn't read that book, so I just started with one episode. And okay. I did a preview kind of thing to just get myself indexed on Apple and all the places.
Okay, kind of as episode zero,
Yeah,
type thing.
which I've actually since taken down and replaced with a trailer. And so, yeah. Oh no, at first I was like, I was so shocked when I had like 30 downloads. Like what? 30 people want to listen to this? Are you serious? And I think a good piece of advice too, use the numbers for what they are, right? We're celebrating doing 50,000 downloads, but they're meaningful, but they're a tool to gauge success. They're not the entire like success of your show. If you're getting good feedback, if your guests are enjoying coming on, if it's not too hard to get people to come on because they've heard the show and they like it, if people are listening, if you get good comments, who cares how many downloads you have, right? Like, yes, if you're hunting sponsors, if you're doing all that, yes, there is an industry like you have to have this many or whatever, right? Or you need some kind of there's some benchmarks to hit. But depending on your goals, if you're just trying to like get your message out there, if you're just trying to do it because you enjoy doing it, and ultimately like some people listen, they tell you they enjoy it, don't get too hung up on the download numbers. Like they're important. I check mine obsessively because that's how I am. I'm a data guy. I love stats. I'll sit there and like refresh the stats over and over, and it's probably completely unhealthy. But like if you talk to like Paul Chomo with the Varmints podcast, he never looks at his stats because that's not why he's doing it.
Yeah.
Like I could probably ask him how many downloads you have on the last episode, and he probably couldn't tell me offhand. He'd have to look. Like, whereas if you ask me, I'm like, oh, I had this many by this day, and I've got a spreadsheet here, and I like nerd out about it.
Wow.
But keep it in context, right? Like, I think I'm super excited that we both hit 50,000. I think that's so cool.
That is very cool, and I'm a bit like you. I kind of refresh, etc. Have the same type of pattern, but one of the things of if you're doing it to assess your value as a podcaster and the value of your podcast, don't do it.
No.
Because there's always someone who does 1,000 times more than you. Always.
Yeah.
Like,
and I heard it said one time, and I thought I think it was somebody tweeted, and I don't remember now who it was, but it was like, keep in mind that if anyone is listening to your show at all or whatever you create, that there's hey Natalie, I just saw Natalie pop up on the comments here, but I heard it said one time that there's a good chance if anyone's listening that your thing may be someone's favorite thing, right? And that's kind of very humbling, right? That somebody listens because they're excited about your content, they're excited about what you're putting out there. So even if you're getting like 20 downloads an episode, one of those 20 people, it may be the highlight of their week. They may need to listen to it. And I think that if we look at it through those content through that lens of what I'm doing is meaningful, separated from the statistics, it makes it easier to keep going. Maybe when you have an off episode, or that happens. You get one, you're like, oh, this is going to do great, and like it's like 3 downloads. You never know, right? It's one of those things.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting that you say that because I don't know your experience, but on my side, podcasting has been it's like you're in a lighthouse, and the continent is a few nautical miles away, so messages take time to get to you. But you're doing your work every day. You're making the lights go whenever the sun goes down, etc., hoping that it serves someone. And then one day there's a letter that arrives, and this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. An email of someone who follows Papa PhD, and she said, "Oh no, it's part of my Saturday and Sunday routine. I'm in my master's now, and I'm thinking of the PhD." And she was, and she it was, I was like emotionally it was so fulfilling. It was so emotional for me to have this one person saying this show is perfect for me right now. Because actually, right now, I'm thinking of, okay, what can I change? What can I improve? And here's this person for whom the show, and she said the fact that it's bilingual because she's here in Montreal, etc. A lot of things that she wrote in her message that actually I need to read. I need to go read it again and think and reflect upon it. But just that one person who wrote that message, she makes the whole endeavor worth it for sure.
Yeah,
Which goes with what you were saying.
100%.
But the thing is, and that's again a warning for people who are starting, unless you have maybe a group of people who you already know are going to be your listeners and are your friends and are actually excited for you to start and are going to give feedback right away, you might have a month, half a year, or more without direct feedback from your listeners. But the day you do, you'll see how awesome that is.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it like you said, it kind of makes the whole thing worth it.
Yeah.
I saw a comment one time in a Facebook group I'm in. Are you in Wild Green Memes? Are you in that Big Ridiculous? It's a Big Ridiculous Facebook group where people share like nature memes.
Okay.
It's a meme page, but it has like 500,000 people in it. So I was scrolling through a thread one day, and I won't call this person out because they may listen. Maybe I will. Yeah, no, I'm going to. Who cares? And I have a follower, a friend. I have a friend on Twitter named Aura. Her username's Vivasaur. She's got great content. She's really funny. And I was scrolling through a post one time or a thread one time on Wild Green Memes, and I recognized her name. And she said, "Oh yeah, my favorite podcast, Planthropology, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Really? Like,
wow.
People listen to this?" I don't know. It still shocks me sometimes. I'm like, really? Like, there's actually a human on the other side of these like numbers, and I know it like up here, but it's and yeah. Natalie said, "Waking up to a new review is wonderful," and that is so true.
Oh, I'm gonna show it here. Yeah,
it's so true.
It is, and it kind of because you until you get that first message or this first couple of message, you can doubt yourself because you're still listening to these awesome and highly produced podcasts every day, and you can easily fall into the error of comparing. But then when this message comes, it is wonderful. It gives you, it kind of recharges your battery for okay, let's do another season. And let's keep bringing people on that have great stories and helping people who are in need of inspiration or in need of some laughter or in need of just a moment of decompression and learning about plants.
For sure.
Question: are your students your listeners? Do you know this? Do you have an idea?
There's a few. I had actually a comment from a former student from last semester, a very, very kind comment, probably kinder than I deserved. And it was really nice. So yeah, some of them listen. I kind of feel weird about like hard selling my podcast to my students. I mentioned it at the beginning of the semester that I've got a podcast, and I'll bring it up from time to time. And if they want to listen, that's fine. I don't want them to feel like they need to, right? This is kind of an aside, but so I do an assignment at the end of the semester where they get to pick like one of three topics that we covered. Like one of them's about like plant breeding and water conservation. We may do climate change this semester, or whatever, 2 or 3 different things. And in the past, I've had them write like a 800-word paper just about that topic. But I realized I have 150 students, and I don't want to grade 158-page papers, or 3-page papers. So what I am going to do this semester, I think I'm going to try it. We'll see how it goes. Is give them the option to write the paper, or do a 5 to 10 minute podcast episode about their topic, or a 5 to 10 minute YouTube like vlog style video about it. Right. And I've got a YouTube channel that I'll upload their stuff to. I'm going to set up actually a new feed, a new RSS feed, maybe through Anchor or something, for my class. And like, they'll send me their content and I will actually post it on there if they want me to. Like I'll give them the option. But I thought, it may be a fun exercise. Not all of them will choose to do it, but I would love to find out of my class like the next big podcaster. How cool would that be?
That'd be so cool.
And I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I think it's just something different, and I think that'll be fun. But no, I don't know. I think a few students listen. I've had a few tell me that they enjoy the show, but I think the ones that maybe have listened and don't enjoy the show won't tell me until it's review time. But I don't know. So there's some, but I try not to hard sell it. It's that feels awkward to me.
Of course. I was just curious, but it's interesting that you allow them to dip their toes in trying to create things in different media versus just writing, especially because not everyone is comfortable or super good at that, and they might be really good on the mic or or in front of a camera. So
yeah,
very cool. I think I hope you'll let us know the results of that experiment.
Yeah, I will for sure.
Vikram, I don't know. We hadn't talked about a time. We've run a little bit over an hour. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but
I mean, I've got a few more minutes if we want to maybe put in some final thoughts or whatever.
Yeah, and for sure. That would be a good thing. I think maybe one thing we could do would be to because you mentioned a couple of times we're part of this group of other podcasters. Maybe a shout out to them. We can't shout out everyone because there's a bunch of people. But I don't know if you want to go that way, or simply we could thank our listeners again. And one of the things that I'd like to do is to tell people that I am open for if they have any questions about the PhD, about the post PhD experience, but also maybe about podcasting as a researcher like you, or as a scientist, but also just about plain old just podcasting process that I'd be glad to answer. I'm a little bit of a gearhead myself, and I see you have your SM7B in front of you, and slightly jealous, but okay, it's okay. I have a this one is actually, I really like it. It's a Rode Procaster, which has really served me well until now, and it's very sturdy mic too. But so gearhead here too.
Yeah. I will say, I think like you're right. There are a bunch of people in this little podcast group we have, and it'd be hard to shout out. But I will say that there are a couple of folks that, when I was starting, really gave me a lot of help. And that's Ellen from Just the Zoo of Us. I think she has been such a great sounding board. Paul from Varmints. Sean from Petri Dish. He's not as active on social media lately, but I think that he is, again, these are all people that I've been able to go to over time and just say, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help. And they're always willing to help. Chris from the Mad Scientist podcast, he actually is very passionate about helping new podcasters, and especially in the science space and all of that. And I've seen Natalie saying that Ellen helped her too as she was getting started. And so there's a lot of great folks out there. And, I wish I could just say everyone's name, but we would be here a while. But
I'm trying to find the list of people that I can't even access it on Twitter. But
I don't know how to do that.
To all of you guys in the group, because we have discussions, and we also promote our episodes amongst each other. But there was this moment where actually we shared trailers of each other's shows, and we were for a while actively posting trailers of each other's shows in our episodes. But again, people are very busy, and it's. This is very, it's not organized at all. We just
no.
we got together in a group on Twitter, and we're chatting, and we're some people ask some questions, and there was a Discord started, I think, but
I'm not good at Discord. I'm not good at that. I don't know how to use it. But I think the point to that story maybe is, like you've said a couple of times, if you're starting out, reach out. I think you will find that most folks in this community would love to help. And if you find someone that's not, I'm sorry, sometimes that happens, but you can always reach out to us. I don't want to speak too much for you, but you kind of said that, and there is help to be had, and I want the industry to succeed, and I want indie podcasters to do well, and I maybe spend more time, gushing about people's shows on Twitter than is comfortable for anyone, but I don't care. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, definitely us helping each other is central. And then if you if you're a listener of the Plant Anthropology podcast and you now learned about Papa PhD and it might be interesting to you, one of the things that helps us a lot as indie podcasters is if you like something and your group of colleagues or friends might like it, if you share it with one or two people, that's one of the best things you can do. And of course, there's leaving reviews here and there, although now it's difficult because not everyone's on Apple and blah blah blah. But just this thing of sharing, or even offering to follow. If someone is not savvy about podcasts, installing an app. There's a bunch of free ones, and subscribing them to the podcast that you like or recommend. That can be a way too. But sharing our that what you like. Sharing what you like is one of the best ways to help us for sure.
For sure, absolutely.
Vikram, it's way well past an hour. I think we have talked about a bunch of things. We went a bunch of different ways, but I think the main thing, at least for me, when I had the idea of doing this, was to thank the listeners for bringing us here. It's really, really motivating to us to see these milestones appear, and it's so funny. I don't know, for people who weren't here at the beginning of the live, I was just showing Vikram I hit 50,000 today, so I'm legit. I can be celebrating this today. But yeah, thanks to everyone and everywhere in the world who's downloaded one episode, listened, to part of it, and or showed or shared our shows with their friends. Thank you so much. That's what keeps us going, and that's what keeps us our batteries full to keep these projects, which are a lot of work. And that we can't hide that it's a lot of work, and that's why you need to try and see if you enjoy the experience. But this is it's really, really great and really motivating.
100%. And I would encourage you to reach out on Twitter, just even if it's just to say, hey, how's it going? And I want more friends. Please come be my friend. And if you're listening to this, if you're out there, connect with us. Papa PhD, Planthropology on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the places. And
I have a ticker tape.
Here. That's so cool. I have no idea. I'm glad you're doing this because I have no idea how to do any of this. That's awesome.
It's gonna come back.
Yeah.
I think on Instagram yours is different.
It's Planthropology Pod on Instagram, and it would have been that on Twitter, but Twitter shorted me a character. So
All right. Very cool, Vikram. Thank you so much for having accepted this. It's a great coincidence, and it's really a happy coincidence that we hit this number almost at the same time. And I want to kind of share this celebration with all the people we know who podcast that are within the group that we mentioned, but also others. And because it's a great industry, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of passion. You'll see. I think you've noticed looking at Vikram. And hearing at least his story, there's a lot of passion between the people who decide to endeavor starting and maintaining a podcast, and I really appreciate that this effort is met with people listening to us. It's that's I think my final words for today. Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and I guess we'll talk to y'all soon.
Yeah. Cheers.